name is Paul Williams. I'm from Performix. Performix is a global performance marketing company. We have a network across 57 different countries, and we primarily deal with full end-to-end solutions across paid, owned, and earned media. Our two primary kind of core solutions are performance, what we call performance media, and it ladders into performance content on the back end that complements all kind of media investment that you do up front. And woven through those things are what we call planning and insights. So obviously a group that interlaces between the two divisions and provides and decodes information, data, et cetera, to help inform media campaigns as well as content. And of course, analytics backs it as well. I personally have, Scott had mentioned, I'm on the performance content team, been working at Performix for about 8 years. 9 years if you count my time doing copywriting back in the day, which sometimes I do regret moving on from that. I really do enjoy copywriting. I have a minor in English, so I kind of come from a pretty heavy content background. And I'm going to kind of want to go through a couple of different things here today. Primarily, I want to discuss 3 different areas, one of which I'm going to kind of step out of my comfort zone a little bit. So first is understanding intent and cross-channel experience creation. So it's really critical, and coming from the agency world, it's it can be oftentimes very complicated to navigate the various stakeholders, both on the agency side and with our clients and companies, if you're from a company, to kind of coordinate between the various campaigns that you might be running, the investments you might be running, and of course, tying that all together with content. And then I want to kind of talk through a couple of case studies around the strategic linking between TV and search. I do not have a ton of background in TV, but I've been working with teams that have worked on it. I've done some content and SEO for TV and worked with some of the SEM teams on it. And there's a really interesting correlation that happens between these two disciplines that can sometimes help bridge the gap between various silos that happen within companies and various silos that happen between agencies when we start working either with our own agency or network of agencies or with even some of our competitors. And then kind of tie it all up with channel and conversion design paths. So it's one thing to invest a lot in media, to spend a lot of time using data and insights and providing guidance for media campaigns and investment. But in order to deliver on the conversion of that intent, that demand that we're starting to capture, you need to make sure that you have an end-to-end solution that actually helps convert really on the core content experiences that we're trying to create and ladder into that. So I wanted to start with a consumer experience journey. It's what we call the consumer experience journey. And since search and social data is closest to the consumer, it's very important that we're deriving the right kinds of insights about customers, about audiences. A lot of that, as Ellen had mentioned, is a very still kind of a human manual process. And there, as we all know, there is a plethora of data out there to actually mine through, to actually try to understand and try to piece together how we actually want to go about building the right kind of media campaigns and content campaigns. This could be, as I mentioned, search and social data is obviously closest to the consumer, and search suggestions, search volume, search intent, all of that is very indicative of the kind of psychology behind how people are thinking about perhaps going down a particular path, exploring a particular product or service, where they are on that journey. Social profiles, the things that we share with each other, the things that we share with different companies and platforms, all of that needs to be decoded and all of that needs to be understood in order to actually properly kind of ladder this all together in one cohesive and holistic experience. So again, intent is something that we focus on a lot at Performix, and it's something that's woven into these different disciplines. So I don't want to spend a ton of time on this. This is probably very familiar to a lot of folks that have built out customer journeys before. Just wanted to kind of give you guys an idea of kind of thinking across channels, across disciplines, across silos, about where, if you had the luxury or the opportunity to actually fluidly work together, which is a very difficult thing, how we'd actually kind of move through this system. So on the far left, we've got, the consumer has a need, right? It may be an active need or it may be a dormant need. Like a great example of a dormant need is, visiting the Amazon homepage. I have so many things on my wish list that I've totally forgotten about. And immediately that dormant intent of buying that book that I added 3 months ago is completely activated, and maybe I go and spontaneously end up buying that. Active intent, you're looking for something. So moving from unawareness, really TV, I'd say, DRTV specifically, search, display, programmatic, all of those things can be activated right there. And you're really generating that demand for your product or your service. Moving to the I want to learn, this is a really interesting area to start activating search, whether it's SEM, whether it's having the right content inventory and optimizing for SEO for visibility within organic search. You want to learn about something, you're not quite a buyer yet, you're going along that path to actually start learning more about it. You're doing research, going to websites, maybe you're going to, if it's a product, you might be going to a marketplace like Amazon to compare different reviews and to compare and contrast different brands. Once you get into this final loop where you actually want to buy, your intent is very clear. I'm sure a lot of us still use search engines to go and actually go buy or purchase something. You might also be visiting something like a marketplace, like a comparative some shopping website, and Amazon, you're actually going and activating and buying that. Search plays a really critical role here, social plays a critical role here, and marketplace optimization. I know in some of these tracks we might have been talking a little bit about Amazon optimization plays a pretty critical role as well. And then of course, you want to keep someone in this loop on the far right. You want to share, you want loyalty, you want to retain retention and so forth, encourage reviews and whatnot, and keep them over there. But closing the gap is really important. I hope that a lot of folks that might have content or SEO experience in the audience, sometimes we get left out of the conversation when it comes to talking about building content experiences and actually tying them back to media. Sometimes there's so much focus that's on the investment side, on the media investment side, that they're dropping folks off on maybe it is personalized experiences, maybe it's just a static, it's just the homepage, it's a static environment. Want to make sure that we're pulling people through this thing very cohesively. So really quick, just wanted to go through kind of our arsenal here of different levers, different channels that we can actually activate on. And again, not everyone has the luxury, not every agency has the luxury to actually activate on each one of these in a fluid, cohesive manner. But in an ideal world, we're hopefully breaking down barriers. We're actually, educating stakeholders, showing business cases to encourage the conversation. And it may be as simple as saying, let's just get a meeting together so we can actually converse about these different channels and how they complement each other, because sometimes that's the easiest way to start. And start building campaigns cohesively and holistically together. So we call this holistic demand and response management. The top left, you've got direct marketing levers, you've got eCRM, email, shared mail. In the middle, we've got what we call performance media. So DRTV, we've got SEM, paid search, social, display, affiliate. And then on the far right, we've got performance content, which is really the bread and butter of the actual post-click, really post-engagement experience when you actually go to a native asset, digital asset, a website, microsite. SEO plays a pretty critical role in there as well. But if you aren't thinking about these things that I've got the arrows across all of them, you aren't really thinking through all of the different permutations that a single campaign could take. So one of the really critical ones, which both Cindy and Alan had talked a little bit about, is conversion optimization. Conversion optimization could represent a number of different facets of your program. It could be A/B testing, hopefully very smart A/B testing and not the Brad kind of testing. It could be multivariate dynamic content, providing message matching, et cetera, with media. Workflow applications are very important as well, so making sure that we're doing the right kind of due diligence around stakeholder alignment, understanding QA, understanding how we move from let's say something like SEM to SEO or SEM to the content, analytics, insights, applications, and technology. One thing that we find very interesting is that there's oftentimes a misalignment about how we're doing research about intent, whether it's keyword research, whether it's content inventory analysis, and sometimes that doesn't go back to the media side of things. I know we all saw that the data mine program that BrightEdge is working on. That's great, and I know that the core audience for that is maybe SEOers today, but that's something that we really want to bridge the gap and bring that over to our media side and let them know about the kinds of content inventory and opportunities that the client has to actually tie that back to a lot of the media channels and a lot of the media activation campaigns that we're doing. And more so than any time before, we've seen a lot of technology A lot of our clients are starting to, especially the enterprise-sized clients, are starting to drift towards full tech stacks. So CMS, the platform, audience management, analytics, actual on-site testing. More and more our clients are starting to shift, and they've organizationally figured out a way to actually convince some of those stakeholders to move to a single tech stack, which makes our lives easier. Obviously, we need to start, if we haven't already, start learning all the ins and outs of these technology stacks. But it's important because now finally we've got stakeholder alignment. Maybe it's just right now in IT and marketing. We're starting to get stakeholder alignment that's very important to understand how all these things can kind of tie together. So I want to talk a little bit about TV now. Quick history on TV. During the 1950s and 70s, 1950s to 70s, AT&T, TV started to kind of take a bit of a change from its sort of static nature as a channel. And during that time period, AT&T introduced toll-free numbers. They started to allow, some of the broadcasting channels started to allow longer ad units, which is great. In the 80s and 90s, cable expansion happened, home shopping networks happened, which I'm sure perhaps some of you are familiar with. And then in the 2000s, obviously the explosion with the internet also occurred, and CTAs started to happen for websites, and we started to tie attribution to the networks. And now it's really about search. It's about multi-screening. I'm sure everyone in this audience can relate to some of the stats up here. You're watching a show, streaming Netflix. You've probably got your smartphone within hand on your laptop, iPad, whatever it might be. And what we found, and I'm sure this is probably a little bit higher, but 78% of US adults are watching TV and also multi-screening. Now, they may not be multi-screening necessarily directly about everything that's on the TV. I'm sure there's games going on, there's email going on. But about 4 in 10, according to the Interactive Advertising Bureau and some other stats that we had pulled, are actually searching for products that they've seen in commercials or seen in placements within actual television shows. So more and more this activity of watching the big screen, watching TV, is kind of merging with social, it's merging with search. And there is a really strong correlation that's starting to happen between what we traditionally call an offline channel with a more active search channel. I'm going to walk you through a couple of case studies to show you how we've actually worked in conjunction with both DRTV and search to kind of demonstrate what this correlation is. So this first one with one of our healthcare clients, and it's over the course of 4 weeks. And this is focused on impressions. So the client really wanted to, it was a very focused engagement around brand impressions and increasing brand share of voice and awareness. And what ended up happening is we activated both DRTV and SEM and kept SEM flat. And what happened during the activation of these DRTV blitzes is that, and on the left it's the media investment, on the right it's the search impressions, there was a 90% correlation between the two when the DRTV was actually active. And so this healthcare client, we ended up meeting the KPI goals that we had set for this. Even though it was kind of an isolated test environment, there was a clear correlation between this, and we actually were able to convince the client, internal stakeholders, that these two channels could actually be united, especially on branded campaign fronts. And it also kind of opened the conversation up to start talking about other ways we could ladder in different channels and show the impact and business case for that. This next one's more of a strategic link to search in the sense that we were focused more on the metric of clicks. So this is a theme park client, and when we decided to keep, again, we kept SEM for the most part flat 4 weeks before we decided to launch a DRTV campaign. This wasn't a seasonal thing or anything. It was very much during kind of a non-seasonal time during the year. So it was a very good isolated experiment and kind of worked out perfectly for a case study. And then when we actually activated the media spend for DRTV, there was a huge spike. It was actually a 300% lift in SEM clicks to the website. Again, it was about brand awareness, but there's a very close correlation there that happened. And as soon as we stopped the investment on DRTV, we saw all the SEM impressions and clicks return to their normal levels without really changing too much with the SEM program. Something similar, I'm going to kind of go off track here and talk a little bit about more of the content and SEO aspect of something similar. We have an electronics manufacturer a client that does a very close co-op with one of the sports organizations every year. And they have player ambassadors, and they do a lot of kind of a blitz around the fall time of year. And from an SEO and content perspective, what we started to notice was that people were actually, when they were watching these commercials on it was either YouTube or they were watching on national television during these sports events, that people were starting to search for the brand plus the actual player name, something the client didn't really anticipate and something we didn't anticipate. But we took those insights and actually recommended to the client to create a game plan around building out content to accommodate those clicks that were happening to the website and some of the impressions that we were getting through search for this new demand that was actually made from TV. So again, there's a close correlation that sometimes needs to happen, that if you were in isolation doing TV or if you're doing video buys and running these commercials, they never would have actually known that they needed to build content if those two teams, which they clearly weren't talking to each other, if that didn't happen. So, again, content can play a very critical role in this as well. And then finally, talking about performance and conversions, this last one is specifically for a home services client that we did. This was over actually a course of several months, but this one was really about conversions. So when we started generating volume to drive performance in SEM and DRTV, we noticed that, and again, the blue lines here are total TV impressions, the reds, the brand SEM quotes, are the actual leads that we generated for this home services client. We had been running a pretty rigorous brand and kind of lead driving campaign with the SEM, paid search. But as soon as we started activating those TV and we were getting these impressions, there was again a very close correlation between running those TV ads and the SEM performance and actual click-through on the website. And what ended up happening is there was a 95% lift in branded. We were running a non-brand campaign to associate with those with that home service client, and even there was drift coming to the website because we were actually targeting these particular home services during the same time we were running the DRTV ads, and there was actually a 45% lift in non-brand as well. We did a little bit of content work on this end too, and made sure that we were mapping the right kind of landing page experiences to the SEM campaigns, and making sure that we're following through. But again, between impressions, click-throughs, and specifically actual running the conversions and the quotes, TV can actually help lift search either during a show or post-show. All that stuff kind of resonates afterwards, and there's kind of a drag effect that you can kind of see that there's still a lot of interest in that even when we stopped doing some of that SEM. So to kind of bookend this, it's really important again that when we talk about doing different multi-channels, that we're trying to work in coordination with multiple stakeholders, multiple groups, potentially multiple agencies, and these things shouldn't be done in isolation. And that even goes back to the actual media and the ad buys. And even the creative behind that. So I know there was some talk from Cindy and Alan earlier about some of the using first-party, second-party, or third-party data to help personalize some of the experiences. Well, sometimes it can be also as simple as if we're going to start doing some kind of TV creative and use some kind of messaging, or whether it's the copywriting, whether it's the imagery, let's make sure that we're actually we make those buys in media and we use those, we flight that kind of creative, that we're linking that messaging and creative to the actual on-page architecture, the actual on-page content, to meet the expectations of users or visitors, and to actually try to drive them for some kind of a desired action. We see this so many times where there's a disconnect in the creative that's being used. It's not even being tested or iterated on, and we see the same kind of thing happening where sometimes that media is not actually mapped to the right kind of landing pages. That doesn't really meet the expectations. It's not relevant. It's not the criteria isn't there to encourage that kind of a conversion. So again, it's very important to kind of complete the journey. When you're thinking about doing media, when you're thinking about doing content, to have a closed loop there. So again, kind of key takeaways. There's been a strong shift from TV, stimulus, direct response, to now more of an indirect, we call kind of response, where something during the show or post-show, people are thinking about the brand, they're searching for it, there's a correlation there that's clearly happening. Linking TV and search budget, flighting creative. Oftentimes, more than often, with all the case studies we had here, increased performance significantly, and again is a great case study and motivation or incentive to start convincing other stakeholders within your organization or across agency lines that we need to coordinate between different channels. And then finally, customizing landing pages experiences, whether that's dynamic, whether it's A/B multivariate. Want to make sure that we're tying the messages together, tying the creative together, and meeting the expectations of users. So thank you.